Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'm here to share with you some information I know about someone who's been deceased for at least 100 years, I believe is the requirement. Just going to start it off with sort of this person's mantra. Two truths cannot contradict one another. This was pretty much how this dead person founded all of their, at least all of his published beliefs. And that dead person is someone you probably have never heard of. His name was Averroes. He was a Muslim philosopher in the late Middle Ages or late Middle Ages would be the correct time frame. Not very well known. Only really in the school of philosophy is he known, and even there he's scarcely mentioned because he didn't do too much, but what he did do was very important, and it's really quite a shame that he didn't get more recognition for it, because had he been recognized, the world might be very different today. Some background information. He was born in Cordoba, Spain in 1126, and at the time that was a very liberal, it was an area that was populated mainly by liberal Muslims. They weren't as conservative and religiously bound as some of the other communities were. This group of Muslims was open to science and philosophy as well as their religious mindset. So at this time, many of these scholars, particularly in Spain, but also across Europe, were Muslim, which is atypical for that because since the time of Averroes, they've tended to lean heavily towards their religious side and not so much towards the scientific or philosophic sides. Came from a highly educated family, and he was a practicing judge like many others in his family, and a legal scholar, and he was also a practicing physician and a philosopher. Some of the things he studied in his youth, biology, astronomy, philosophy, and many other sciences, including botany. Basically, Averroes got his fame when one of his contemporaries named Al-Ghazali wrote his The Incoherence of Philosophers. And it was a book that was published in this community and spread all throughout the Muslim world. And basically in the book he argues that philosophy and science should not be applied to religion or any people who believe in religion. They were told to just dismiss it in this book. And because of this book, it prompted a lot of distrust in philosophy across the Islamic world. This was important because it was at this time that many of Aristotle's texts were discovered and translated into Latin and were moving very heavily into the Muslim religious sect. Averroes wrote The Incoherence of the Incoherence in response to Al-Ghazali's book. And in his book, Averroes argues that philosophy and religion are both true. They just arrive at it in different ways. And he goes on to say, however, when the two truths conflict, religion should be understood allegorically, not so much in a literal sense, more in depth. Basically, what he gets into is saying that if a philosopher or a scientist has already proven something to be true beyond a shadow of a doubt, then the community as a whole should accept that as fact. And when he says something's true, he means irrefutably so. As much as to where you cannot argue against it. It's very concrete. It's been proven completely. For example, in the Muslim community, obviously their religious leaders tell them that there is some form of creation, whether it be from a deity or whether it happened in another intelligent fashion. Aristotle came to the same conclusion. So they both arrived at it from different avenues, but they came up with the same fundamental truth. So Averroes says there's no reason to distrust either one in this case. And says that, and later in the book he goes into the fact that if religion and philosophy diverge in some way, then the religious text should not be interpreted completely literally, saying basically that if a philosopher has proven something to be true and a religious text says something to the contrary, then maybe we should look at that as a metaphor or an allegory instead of holding it as concrete truth. He also goes on to say that, particularly in this time, because many people were illiterate, argues that religious text uses grand imagery in order to explain things or occurrences that people can't wholly understand. Some people can't wholly understand the philosophic evidence, so they create these grand images to help explain events or truths to the normal person, just the everyday worker in that size of society. He wasn't very popular because of his beliefs. Many of the conservative Muslims accused him of heresy, among other things. One person actually said that he was possessed. He was reviled and publicly beaten, and then finally he was banished. Although he was not killed from that. Alvarez died in 1198 while he was living in Morocco. This picture here is the monument attributed to him in Cordoba, which still stands to this day. I got my information from this book right here. It's called The Great Philosophers, written by Stephen Law, who was a professor of philosophy at Oxford and has published several books in this field. And this is sort of a condensed version to help out beginners understand these complex theories.